Imagine a world where you don't own your house, your car, or, even your money. You have absolutely zero private property to your name.
Which is pretty hard to wrap your head around.
Oh, completely. But imagine that instead of feeling destitute, you're actually happier. You're more secure and living in a more advanced society because of it.
Yeah, for most of us, that scenario just violates everything we understand about how the world works.
Exactly. I mean, you work hard, you earn something, you own it, and then you pass it on. We treat that sequence not just as economics, but as, well, the basic law of human nature.
Right. It's essentially the operating system of the modern world.
Hmm.
We build our entire lives, our global markets, our legal frameworks, all on the assumption that private ownership is the bedrock of progress.
Yeah.
Just suggest otherwise isn't just tweaking the system. It's tearing up the floorboards of Western civilization.
Which is exactly what we are doing today. Welcome to this deep dive. We've tailored this conversation specifically for you, the listener, to explore a really fascinating 2023 essay.
It's by a thinker named Su Feng.
Right. And it's titled, Private Ownership is an Obstacle to the Ascension of Human Civilization. And, just to be clear up front, we aren't here to convince you to sell all your earthly possessions today.
No, definitely not.
Or tell you this is the only way forward. We're just acting impartially here. We're serving as your tour guides through a radically different intellectual architecture.
And to really understand this architecture, we have to start with the foundation it's trying to demolish.
Which brings us to John Locke.
Exactly. Specifically, his work from over 400 years ago, the Second Treatise of Civil Government. I mean, if you want to understand why America and the broader Western world function the way they do today, you look at Locke.
Yeah, he's the guy.
He argued that private ownership is the literal bedrock of morality and natural law. Before private property, Locke basically argued that humanity was just fumbling around in a chaotic state of nature.
Right, just a free-for-all.
Yeah. So the act of claiming ownership is, in his view, what birthed civilization itself.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because Woofing doesn't just disagree with Locke. He takes the exact opposite stance.
He really does.
But to grasp the critique, we really need to understand the mechanics of Locke's argument first. Why did Locke think property was so magical?
Well, it really comes down to what Locke believed about human motivation. He observed that human beings are fundamentally, inherently driven by self-interest.
Okay.
Therefore, a functional society has to be built around protecting and rewarding that self-interest.
Yeah.
And to prove his point, Locke posed three famous rhetorical questions that, they really still resonate today.
Let's hear them.
First, if wealth is not yours, why would you strive to create it? Second, if a son is not yours, why would you educate him? And third, if a wife is shared, why would you cherish her?
Wow. I mean, those questions are potent because they appeal directly to our daily intuition.
Exactly.
Like if you ask anyone on the street right now, hey, if you couldn't keep your paycheck, would you still go to work? The answer is a resounding no.
Right, of course.
Locke's mechanism is essentially that without a possessive attachment like my money, my child, my spouse, human motivation just evaporates.
Yeah.
He's saying selfishness is the engine and private property is the transmission that turns that energy into societal progress.
That is a perfect way to visualize it.
Right.
Locke believed you cannot fight human selfishness, so you have to harness it. But this is exactly where Su Feng introduces a massive paradigm shift.
Right.
The counter-argument here isn't that Locke was foolish. The argument is that Locke was a brilliant thinker who was just completely trapped by the limitations of his era. Ideas, no matter how genius, have an expiration date.
Yeah, there is an analogy in the essay to explain this, comparing Locke to a highly skilled carriage driver in an era of automobiles, and the visual is just so striking.
It really is.
It's like saying Locke was the absolute best at navigating a horse-drawn carriage. But if you take those exact same carriage driving skills and apply them to a modern 6-lane highway, you're going to cause a massive pileup.
Exactly. The environment fundamentally changed, rendering the old rules dangerous.
And by framing it that way, historical philosophy is entirely recontextualized.
Right. A philosophical framework can be absolutely correct and necessary for one stage of human development, the carriage era, but then become actively detrimental when civilization tries to shift into the next gear.
Yeah, so Locke's defense of private ownership was perhaps necessary to pull us out of feudalism.
But Su Feng argues it's now the very thing preventing us from ascending further.
But I want to push back on this a little bit on behalf of our listener, because there seems to be a flaw in that analogy.
Oh, no.
We indent cars, so we need stoplights. Traffic laws change because technology changes. That makes perfect sense. But Locke wasn't talking about technology. He was talking about human nature.
Right.
Human nature doesn't just upgrade overnight like a new smartphone, you know? You can't
Ah.
just legislate away human selfishness.
This raises an important question, and it's the exact friction point where Sufing introduces the concept of civilizational dimensions.
Dimensions, okay.
Yeah. The proposition here is that human nature isn't actually as static as we think. Different dimensions of civilization offer entirely different cognitive realities.
Like different levels of a video game.
Kind of. If you're standing in the third dimension, the rules of the second dimension seem incredibly restrictive. And to someone in a higher dimension, the foundational truths of a lower dimension look almost laughable.
Laughable. I mean, calling the foundational philosophy of the entire Western economy laughable is quite the flex.
It is a bold claim, for sure. Schuffing hesitates to claim a personal stance of being in a higher dimension than John Locke, but argues that mathematically and philosophically, Locke's viewpoint simply cannot align with an advanced form of human civilization.
I see.
Trying to align inherently selfish private ownership with a highly evolved, peaceful society is viewed as a fundamental error in calculation. It just doesn't compute.
So if Locke is just an outdated carriage driver, that implies his rules are harmlessly obsolete. But the author isn't just saying private property is obsolete, he's saying it is actively causing the crashes. The essay levels some incredibly severe allegations, essentially blaming private ownership for the vast majority of human suffering.
The stakes are existential here. This isn't just a critique of greed. The argument is that private ownership is the core generator of our wars, our societal turmoil, and, most urgently, our ecological despair.
Oh.
Think about the mechanics of it. If the fundamental rule of success is individual accumulation, then people and nations are constantly incentivized to extract more than they need.
Right, which directly leads to the symptoms listed in the essay: deforestation, land desertification, atmospheric pollution.
Exactly.
If my primary motivation is to accumulate personal wealth, I'm heavily incentivized to clear-cut a forest faster than my neighbor. It's the tragedy of the commons, but supercharged by a philosophy that says owning more makes you a better citizen.
And that economic system, which is based on infinite individual accumulation, is completely incompatible with a finite planet. The drive to own inevitably demands endless consumption, which accelerates the ecological collapse we are seeing today.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the author doesn't just look at Earth to solve this earthly problem. The scope zooms way, way out into the cosmos.
Yeah, it gets big.
The essay proposes that there are actually 20 different types of civilizations in the universe.
To understand this macro perspective, the author uses a sort of algebraic modeling to categorize these cosmic civilizations.
Okay.
They use variables like x, y, and z to represent the state of a civilization. For instance, a civilization represented by x, y, z is entirely different from one represented by negative x, negative y, negative z. And even a civilization that is x, y, but negative z is profoundly different from an x, y, z society.
Wait, I have to stop you there. What do these variables actually mean? Are we talking about algebraic equations for aliens?
Not exactly.
Because if I'm listening to this trying to understand how to fix society, hearing about negative z societies is pretty opaque.
Let's ground it. While the text uses these variables as a theoretical framework, you can think of them as the core pillars of civilizational health. Say X is technological mastery, Y is social harmony, and Z is spiritual or moral awareness. A society that is negative across the board is primitive and brutal.
Makes sense.
A society that is X and Y but negative Z might have flying cars and no poverty, but they are spiritually bankrupt and entirely selfish, which means they will eventually self-destruct.
Right.
The XYZ model represents a civilization that is highly advanced in all dimensions simultaneously.
So it's mapping out a cosmic spectrum of organizational potential, and the thesis here is that you cannot reach that ultimate XYZ status while dragging the anchor of private ownership.
That is the core takeaway from observing these models. The overarching thesis is that the more advanced a cosmic civilization becomes, the further it moves away from human selfishness and private ownership.
Interesting.
The warning is that if we only ever look at human history, we are confined to a tiny data set. We'll never even be able to imagine the patterns of a truly advanced civilization because we've never seen one.
Okay, but I have to jump in here again. Because while it is fun to talk about hypothetical XYZ cosmic civilizations, how does this abstract math actually help us here on Earth?
That's the big question.
We are dealing with humans who are notoriously selfish. It's fine to say a highly advanced, enlightened alien society doesn't use money, but we still have rent to pay. How does pointing at the stars solve the Locke problem on the ground?
That is the crucial pivot. Feng brings this entire cosmic theory crashing back down to Earth by challenging Locke's fundamental assumption about what a human being actually is.
Okay.
To solve the rent problem, we have to look at what the text calls the cosmic holographic theory of human nature.
Because Locke assumed humans are inherently statically selfish. That was his baseline.
Yes, Locke's entire architecture rests on the idea that selfishness is a fixed constant. But the cosmic holographic theory suggests Locke missed a profound layer of complexity, which we aren't just one static thing. The theory posits that humans possess humane, animalistic, and divine traits all bundled together simultaneously. We are holographic in the sense that we contain the entire spectrum of the universe within us.
Which brings us to an agricultural analogy in the essay that I think is the most clarifying moment in this whole text. It explains this malleability beautifully.
I love this part.
The author points out that if you plant oranges south of the Huai River, you get sweet oranges. But if you take those exact same seeds and plant them north of the Huai River, you get bitter trifoliate oranges.
Right.
The genetic code of the seed is identical. The potential is the same. But the environment, the soil, the temperature, the water, dictates what actually blooms.
It completely reframes human behavior. The diverse circumstances and systems we live within dictate which aspects of our nature manifest.
Yeah.
In this framework, private ownership is simply the bitter soil north of the river. It is a societal breeding ground that actively cultivates our animalistic, competitive, and selfish traits, while systematically starving our divine and selfless ones.
So, to put it plainly, we have built an entire global society north of the Huai River, and we're looking around wondering why all the oranges are bitter.
Exactly.
We blame human nature, we blame the seed, when we should be looking at the soil we planted it in.
And if you change the soil, you change the human. To prove this isn't just cosmic theorizing, the essay introduces a practical, physical experiment happening right here on Earth.
Right.
Life Changyuan has spent 14 years attempting to apply these advanced civilizational models on the ground.
This is a 14-year experiment in what the text calls non-ownership. And it's really important to define what that means, because when people hear we should get rid of private property, they immediately think of public ownership.
Like state-controlled resources.
Exactly. But the essay explicitly says this is a third way entirely.
The distinction is vital. Public ownership still implies that a collective entity, usually a government, owns the resources and dictates their distribution.
Which still causes problems.
Right. That model still breeds power struggles, bureaucracy, and a scarcity mindset, because someone is still deciding who gets what. Non-ownership is the complete release of the possessive claim altogether. It operates on the principle of access rather than possession.
So how does a community actually run without mine and yours? I mean, what does a day in the life of a non-ownership model look like?
The text points to specific models developed in this experiment, like the second home and the 1,000-year world.
Okay.
In these models, all resources are available for use, but no one claims them as personal wealth. It's somewhat like a public library, but applied to housing, food, and daily needs. You use the book, you benefit from it, but you don't need to hoard it in your basement to feel secure.
And the results of this 14-year experiment directly challenge Locke's 3 foundational questions. Let's revisit them.
Good idea.
Locke's first question was, if wealth is not yours, wouldn't you stop making an effort? The essay observes that in these experimental non-ownership models, everyone works diligently without the incentive of private wealth accumulation. They are motivated by community well-being and personal fulfillment rather than hoarding capital.
And moving to Locke's second question. If a child is not yours, wouldn't you refuse to raise and educate them? The Life Changyuan experiment demonstrates that care can be completely decoupled from biological ownership.
Oh.
The community collectively raises and educates all children, regardless of biological ties. They're driven by a shared responsibility for the next generation, rather than just extending one's own genetic legacy.
And then there's the third, perhaps most revealing question from Locke. If a wife is considered a shared entity, wouldn't you stop cherishing her?
Yeah.
First off, the phrasing shows how much Locke viewed human relationships through the lens of property. But the text notes that in this non-ownership model, there is no concept of individual wives or spouses as property at all.
Right. Completely different paradigm.
Yet everyone deeply respects women and values human relationships. In fact, Schufen categorizes all 3 of Locke's questions as stemming from a primitive animalistic mindset.
The psychological outcome of this 14-year experiment is what truly turns our current understanding upside down.
Hmm.
Through the non-ownership model, the text claims people can attain a state of complete selflessness.
Okay.
And the counterintuitive result is that the more selfless a person becomes, the more they actually enjoy the pleasures of life and the wonders of existence.
Which is the exact opposite of what the modern world teaches us. We are constantly told that accumulating things brings security, and security brings happiness.
But the essay argues that owning things actually generates anxiety.
Yeah.
It binds you to your lowest traits because you are constantly terrified of losing what you have acquired or, jealous of what others have.
It is a massive cognitive leap to accept. But following this logic, private ownership is not the stabilizing foundation of human civilization. It is an active barrier.
Yeah.
It's the heavy gravity keeping us trapped in a lower dimension of existence.
And even if you have no intention of joining a 14-year utopian experiment, this framework forces a fascinating audit of your everyday life. It makes you look at the systems you participate in, your workplace, your neighborhood, your family dynamics. Are the rules of those spaces bringing out your inner sweet orange or your bitter orange?
Oh, I see.
Are you being incentivized by your environment to act on your divine traits or your animalistic ones?
That is the practical application of the cosmic holographic theory. The implication is empowering, really. We have significantly more control over human nature than Locke believed.
Exactly.
We don't have to just build guardrails for our selfishness. We can change the rules of engagement entirely.
Precisely.
So what does this all mean? We started our journey with John Locke arguing that ownership is the very definition of civilization.
Right.
And we arrived at Feng arguing that ownership is the final obstacle to our ascension. How do we synthesize these two extremes?
The synthesis is found in a profound paradox introduced near the end of the text. The essay states, genuine individuality arises from selflessness, and self-discovery unfolds through self-abandonment.
That's heavy.
It is the ultimate inversion of Western individualism. The current model says you define who you are by what you accumulate, your job title, your house, your bank account.
Yeah.
The proposition here is that you can only discover your true unburdened self when you completely abandon the need to own anything.
To have everything, one must possess nothing. That is a line from the text that just stops you in your tracks. It perfectly encapsulates the paradigm shift.
It really does. And the conclusion drawn is that Locke's worldview, while perhaps useful in the 17th century, fundamentally fails to grasp this higher dimensional concept.
Right.
Locke built a brilliant system designed to manage animalistic traits so they wouldn't destroy society. The alternative being proposed is a system designed from the ground up to cultivate divine traits, allowing society to finally ascend past the need for management.
It is an incredible journey of an idea, taking us from a 17th century English philosopher, zooming out to a theoretical mathematics of 20 cosmic civilizations, zooming back down to an orange grove divided by the Huai River, and finally into a 14-year experiment in abandoning the concept of mine.
And the choice it leaves us with is stark. Do we view ourselves as inherently selfish creatures who require the strict guardrails of property just to survive each other?
Or are we holographic beings full of limitless potential who are currently trapped in an outdated environmental model that is actively stunting our growth?
Exactly.
Which brings us to our final thought for today. If the author is right and our environments act exactly like the soil of the Huai River, literally pulling different behaviors and traits out of us depending on where we are planted, I want you to think about one small, everyday environment you inhabit right now.
Just one.
Yeah, maybe it's a specific group chat on your phone with your friends. Maybe it's a particular social media feed you scroll through every morning, or a weekly meeting room at your job. Look closely at the unspoken rules of that specific space.
That's a great exercise.
Is that microenvironment quietly cultivating your animalistic traits? Is it running on fear, competition, and a scarcity of attention? And if it is, what is one practical way you could shift the soil in that space tomorrow to cultivate your divine ones instead?
Shifting the soil. I love that.
At the beginning of this deep dive, we talked about how some political ideas feel like gravity, absolute, unquestionable forces keeping our feet tethered to the ground. But maybe, just maybe, if we change the rules of the environments we build for ourselves, we might find that what we thought was gravity was really just a very heavy pair of shoes we forgot we were wearing.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into our sources today. We hope it sparked a new perspective for you, and we warmly invite you back for our next intellectual adventure. Until then, keep questioning the bedrock.